بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الحدي حدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So we continue today to take some benefits from the book Kitabul Ilm of Sheikh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala. In yesterday's lesson we started from the very basics with the definition of what is ilm. And so the Shaykh gave that definition: إدراك الشيء على ما هو عليه إدراكا جازما. So the scholars, they explain knowledge and its levels, what actually amounts to knowledge, what can be acted upon, and what is the opposite of knowledge, jahl and its types, and those things that don't reach the level of knowledge, whether it is shak, whether it is wahm. So all of this is important to understand because, as we said, we are ordered to have knowledge. فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. And likewise the scholars, when they teach, they say اِعْلَمْ رَحِمَكَ اللَّهِ. Know, have knowledge. May Allah have mercy upon you. So what is the reality of this knowledge? So as a recap of yesterday's lesson, we basically said that knowledge is to comprehend or grasp something upon what it actually is, with firmness, with conviction, with certainty. So I'll give a few examples to illustrate the different levels. So for example, we said yesterday that if someone asks you what year was the farewell pilgrimage, Hijjatul Wida', then if someone says to you 10 Hijrah, with certainty, this now is ilm, because this ilm has come through successive transmission, through trustworthy people in such a large scale that it's come to you, and that knowledge agrees with the reality. It was 10 Hijrah, and it is with jazm, it is with conviction, with firmness that you hold this. So this now is ilm. This now is ilm. If someone then said to you that overwhelmingly in my dhan I believe it is 10 Hijrah, although it could be other than it, but overwhelmingly I think it's 10 Hijrah, this now would be dhan. This is strong dhan. This is strong presumption. It doesn't reach the level of knowledge. If somebody said to you, I'm doubting whether it was 9 Hijrah or 10 Hijrah. It could be 9, could be 10. It's equal, I don't know either way, it's 9 or 10. This now is shak, this is doubt. If someone said to you, I'm fairly certain it was 5 Hijrah, I'm fairly certain, more likely than so it was 5 Hijrah. This now is wahm. This is like a delusion where you strongly believe in something, but it's other than the reality. If you said, I am certain it was 5 Hijrah, this then would be jahl murakkab, right? So the fourth level is wahm. The fifth level is jahl, where you say, I don't know what year the farewell pilgrimage was. I have no idea. I've not come across anything. I don't know. It's completely unknown to me. This is simple ignorance. You just don't know. And you can go and find out. You can ask somebody and you can find out. And finally, the worst type or the lowest type is al-jahl al-murakkab, where you say, absolutely it happened in 5 Hijrah. So you don't know and you think you know, but you don't know that you don't know, right? This is jahl murakkab. So we mentioned that in yesterday's lesson, and we said that this is important to understand because it applies this applies to any knowledge, to what Allah revealed, to the Sharia, and likewise in the world, in the worldly types of knowledge. And that's why Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, Al-ilmu ma qama alayhi dalil. Knowledge is whatever evidence is established for it. وَالنَّافِعْ مِنْهُ مَا جَاءَ بِهِ الرَّسُولُ. But the beneficial knowledge is what the messenger came with. Right? So he made it clear that knowledge is anything for which evidence can be established, whether it's revealed knowledge, whether it's worldly knowledge. But the beneficial, the inherently beneficial, is only the Sharia knowledge. So then Ibn Taymiyyah explained what that Sharia knowledge is. He said it's three categories. Everything that Allah revealed to us is in three categories. It's either about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His names, His attributes, His actions, and whatever follows on from that. Secondly, it's the akhbar, whatever Allah has informed us about the past, the present, the future, paradise, hellfire, the unseen, the grave, stories of the Prophet, stories of past nations, the reward in paradise, in hellfire. All of these are akhbar, they are reports, information. So this is beneficial knowledge. And the third is whatever Allah commanded the hearts to do or the limbs to do. Right? So these are Allah's commands, the ahkam, the awamir, the commands and the prohibitions. So this is what is the inherently beneficial knowledge. And this is what the prophets and messengers came with. The Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah mentioned that this specifically is the knowledge which is praiseworthy. He mentioned the hadith about cross-pollination. When the Messenger, he came to some people, they were cross-pollinating. He said, maybe it might be better if you don't do that. And so they took the advice, they didn't do it, and the crop yield wasn't very good. So then he came to them and he said that I informed you about from my dhan, from what I believe. And you are more knowledgeable of the affairs of your religion. But that which I inform you from Allah. So he himself made the distinction between the reports he brings from revelation and what he says from his opinion. We mentioned how Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned this is actually a proof of prophethood. Why is it proof of prophethood? Because those people who are cross-pollinating, they had knowledge, they had intelligence, they had empirical research which they accumulated, and these are from the tools and means that people have to learn knowledge and sciences. So if what the messenger brought, as is claimed by the philosophers, atheists, that he was a clever man, he was an intelligent man, he devised all of this from his own mind, this knowledge that he brought, if that was true, then any other type of people who have that worldly ability, knowledge, all the tools, means of understanding, then they would have brought something like that. But they never brought anything like the Quran, or the knowledge of the unseen, or the stories of the prophets, or the rulings, the ahkam, all together as truth and wisdom and rectification. Nobody brought that. So this is a proof that it actually has to be from revelation. It can't be from any other way. This is a proof of his prophethood. So we looked at that as well, and after this, this is basically where we finished. And after that, the Shaykh rahimahullah, he went on to explain about the ruling on worldly types of knowledge, that if they bring benefit to a person, to Muslims, if they bring you closer to Allah, and if they aid the deen of Allah, then these types of knowledge, they become obligation collectively. Right? So things like, he mentioned weaponry and, things that people need, utensils, means of transport, things like that. And so that's where we finished in yesterday's lesson. We're going to continue today, inshallah ta'ala, to look at the next section. So the next section is Fada'ilul Ilm, the virtues and the excellence of knowledge. And so the Shaykh begins by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has لَقَدْ مَدَحَ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى الْعِلْمِ وَأَهْلَهُ. He has praised knowledge and its people, and he has encouraged his servants عَلَى الْعِلْمِ وَالتَّزَوُّدْ مِنْهُ, to acquire knowledge and to take it as provision, and likewise from the purified sunnah. He then says that knowledge, فَالْعِلْمِ مِنْ أَفْضَلِ الْأَعْمَالِ الصَّالِحَةِ, to acquire knowledge is from the most excellent of the righteous actions. In other words, seeking ilm is in itself a righteous action. وَهُوَ مِنْ أَفْضَلِ وَأَجَلِّ الْعِبَادَاتِ. Rather, it is from the most excellent and the most loftiest of acts of worship, and from the acts of worship which are voluntary. Because he says, لِأَنَّهُ نَوْعٌ مِنَ الْجِهَادِ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Because it is a type of jihad in the path of Allah. فَإِنَّ دِينَ اللَّهِ, for indeed the religion of Allah Azza wa Jal, إِنَّمَا قَامَ بِأَمْرَيْنِ. It is established by two things. The first of them, al-ilmu wal-burhan. Al-ilmu wal-burhan. So it is knowledge along with its evidence. Knowledge along with its evidence. And secondly, al-qitalu was-sinan. Al-qitalu was-sinan, which is fighting and the spearhead. So fighting, which you use the spearhead, and knowledge, for which you acquire evidence. So then he says, it is necessary for these two affairs, because it is not possible to establish the deen of Allah and to make it manifest except by these two things. And of these two things, knowledge is the one that is put before the second one, which is struggling and striving with al-qital wa sinan. And then he gives the evidence. He says, because we know the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he never used to raid or engage a people in a battle until he would make them reach the da'wah first. So the knowledge would reach them first, and if they obviously refused or didn't accept, then it would then be qital, it would be fighting. So this knowledge that the Shaykh is mentioning, this is the knowledge that is praiseworthy. It is the one that is praised in the Sharia. And I want to mention a number of narrations here so that we fully understand that when we speak of beneficial knowledge, even though Allah has described that as beneficial knowledge, that which Allah revealed, it does not mean that it is actually beneficial for the one who's holding it. Right? So even though this ilm that Allah revealed, this knowledge that He revealed, it is al-ilmu nafi' wal-amalu salih. It is al-ilmu nafi' and righteous action. It is not actually beneficial for the person unless there are certain other things present with it or follow on from it, and when certain things are absent from it. So this will be explained by a number of narrations. So for example, it is Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions, this is mentioned by al-Hilya, it's Tahdhib. So he said, إِنَّمَا يُطْلَبُ الْعِلْمِ لِيُتَّقَ اللَّهُ بِهِ. Indeed, knowledge is pursued so that Allah can be feared by way of it. فَمِن ثُمَّ فَضْلٍ. It is this which gives the knowledge its excellence. Right? So here when the Shaykh is speaking of the excellence, fada'ilul ilm, the excellence of knowledge, that knowledge only becomes excellent, even though that knowledge is inherently beneficial in and of itself, but in relation to the servant, it only becomes beneficial, it only becomes virtuous and excellent when it is done and when these things are present. So he said, indeed, knowledge is sought لِيُتَّقَ اللَّهُ بِهِ, so that Allah is feared by way of it. فَمِن ثُمَّ فَضْلٍ. It is here where its excellence and its virtue lies. فَلَوْلَا ذَلِكَ لَكَانَ كَسَائِرِ الْأَشْيَاءِ. Had this not been the case, then that knowledge would be just like every other thing. So do you understand what he's saying now? He's saying that if this knowledge, which is inherently beneficial, if that knowledge is not sought so that you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing what He commanded, avoiding what He prohibited, and seeking nearness to Him, and seeking His face, and seeking paradise, and so on and so forth, then really your act in acquiring this knowledge would be no different from you acquiring knowledge of any other thing. Engineering, mathematics, geology, biology. It might as well just be any other thing. Because what's the difference between this knowledge and that knowledge in that case? Right? This knowledge is there so that Allah is feared. And that's why in the Quran, the ayah that you heard yesterday and again today, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Only those from Allah's servants fear Him, those who are the scholars. Because there is khashya, there is awe and fear, which is the purpose behind this ilm. Now there are certain things that come in the way and prevent a person from benefiting from this beneficial knowledge. So in relation to that individual, it no longer is beneficial knowledge, al-ilm al-nafi, even though inherently it is beneficial knowledge. Also from Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, he said, al-alimu tabibu din. The scholar is the physician of the religion. وَالدِّرْهَمْ دَاءُ الدِّينِ. وَالدِّرْهَمْ دَاءُ الدِّينِ. But the dirham, wealth, money, is the sickness, is the illness, the ailment of religion. فَإِذَا جَذَبَ الطَّبِيبُ أَدَّى إِلَى نَفْسِهِ فَمَتَى يُدَاوِي غَيْرَهُ. So when the tabib himself, when he draws the sickness or the illness to himself, which is the wealth, meaning being motivated by wealth and seeking the dunya, seeking the wealth, then when will he treat others? When will he treat others? Okay, so the point being here now is that wealth is one of those things in the presence of which, if a person is motivated, he will be put to trial in his religion, and his intention will not be sincere, and his intentions will be mixed. And so this is really where the fitan and the tribulations enter into a person's life, and into the da'wah, and into relationships in unity. When inwardly people are not motivated purely and sincerely for the sake of Allah, and so that they are seeking knowledge for taqwa, so that Allah is feared. This is the origin of trials and tribulations. He also said, Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah, al-a'malu sayyi'ah da'un. Evil actions are a disease. Wal-ulama dawa. And the scholars are the cure, or the medicine, or the treatment. فَإِذَا فَسَدَ الْعُلَمَاء فَمَنْ يَشْفِي الدَّاء. So if the scholars become corrupt, then who will cure the illness? So once again, sin in the presence of sin. When a person carries knowledge, but then he pollutes that with sin, right? He's supposed to be treating the illness. But when he has sin, then how will he heal or cure the sickness in other people if he has the sickness himself? So once again, in this situation, in the presence of sin, major sin, persisting in minor sin, this pollutes what a person has of ilm. And it no longer becomes al-ilm al-nafi' with respect to him. It no longer has the quality of having fadl, having the excellence. Right? So these are important narrations from Sufyan al-Thawri. And likewise also, we have from Abi Hazim rahimahullah ta'ala, this is in the Tahdhib of Siyar, he said, لا تكون عالما حتى يكون فيك ثلاث خصال. You will not be a scholar until you have three properties, three qualities. First of all, لا تبغي على من فوقك. Do not transgress against the one who is above you. The one who is above you in knowledge, in status. وَلَا تَحْقِرْ مَنْ دُونَكَ. Do not belittle the one who is less than you. وَلَا تَأْخُذْ عَلَىٰ عِلْمِكَ دُنْيَا. And do not take for your ilm the world, meaning a portion of the world. Do not be motivated in your ilm to acquire wealth and to acquire. So these, you will not be an alim, meaning you will not be one who has knowledge, who has ilm. Ilm which is beneficial, ilm which is virtuous, until you have these three properties. Do not seek to be, do not seek to pursue to be greater than those who are above you, or to transgress against them. Do not belittle those who are beneath you. And this is one of the great diseases that can be found amongst people, that just because you have acquired knowledge, and you have acquired memorization, and you have acquired understanding, that this how makes you belittle and look down upon other people. This can never come from a person who has true knowledge. You can never belittle. This is not the way of the Salaf. In fact, with many narrations from the Salaf, they would say that we would write from the one who is greater than us, and we would write from the one who is lesser than us. As long as it is ilm, it doesn't matter who it comes from. So this issue of arrogance and pride and belittling other people, firstly, and then secondly, seeking wealth or seeking a portion of the world by way of the ilm, mixing pursuit of the world with ilm, as we find happening with people. This cannot make you an alim, meaning one who has ilm which is beneficial, which is virtuous, and which has the desired effect. These are things which pollute. These are things which prevent the desired effect. Likewise also to Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala. It was said to him, Man nas'al ba'dak? Who can we ask after you? Who shall we ask after you? When you pass away, you are gone. Who can we go to? Who can we ask? He said, قال Abdul Wahhab al-Warraq, rahimahullah. So he mentioned Abdul Wahhab al-Warraq. So then they said to him, قِيلَ لَهُ إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ لَهُ اتِّسَاعٌ فِي الْعِلْمِ. They said, but he doesn't really have a great deal of knowledge. Like his knowledge isn't expansive and huge. So what did Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala say? He said, قَالَ إِنَّهُ رَجُلٌ صَالِحٌ مِثْلُهُ يُوَفَّقْ لِإِصَابَةِ الْحَقِّ. So he said, indeed, he is a righteous man. A righteous man. So he doesn't have expansive knowledge, but he's righteous. And the likes of him is granted success in reaching the truth. In reaching the truth. So you see, it's not about having expansive knowledge, expansive memorization. This is not what the issue is. The issue is having taqwa, being righteous, and acting upon what you know. And if you do that, Allah will give you tawfiq. Allah will grant you success in arriving at the truth in whatever issues they might be, whether in religion, whether it might be in arbitrating between people, whether it might be in terms of being just in your dealings to arrive at the truth, in giving fatawa to arrive at the truth. Right? It's not about expansive knowledge. It is about the rectification of the inside with the knowledge that you have. He was also asked, وَسُئِلَ رَحِمَهُ اللَّهِ عَنْ مَعْرُوفِ الْقَرْخِ فَقَالَ كَانَ مَعَهُ أَصْلُ الْعِلْمِ خَشْيَةُ اللَّهِ. So he was asked about another person, another well-known righteous person by the name of Ma'ruf al-Karhi. So he said, he had with him كَانَ مَعَهُ أَصْلُ الْعِلْمِ خَشْيَةُ اللَّهِ. He had with him the base or the foundation of ilm. And what is that? It is khashyatullah. It is the awe of Allah. It is the fear of Allah. Meaning that condition or that trait or quality is what knowledge sits on top of. So you have to have that first for knowledge to be fruitful, to be beneficial and to have its desired effect. So from all of these narrations, coming back to the point that we were making, what the Shaykh is saying, that knowledge, seeking knowledge, is from the greatest of the acts of worship. It is from the greatest of the righteous actions. It is that which precedes other things, such as al-qital. However, even though it is beneficial, even though it has virtue, that is only the case when that knowledge, when the asl of it is khashya, when there is internal rectification, when there is absence of seeking the dunya, when there is absence of pollution by way of sins, when there is absence of pride and arrogance. And there are other things as well, inshallah, that we will look at later on, such as jealousy and things like that. Okay? So if you follow there's a connection. So we mentioned first of all the definition of ilm, what actually is ilm, as opposed to wahm and shak and jahl murakkab, which is what you find with the kuffar and the mubtadi'ah, right? Because this is what their beliefs and their methodologies are built upon. So we have to first of all know what actually is ilm. And then what is the beneficial ilm? And then, even though that is beneficial ilm, is it actually beneficial in your specific case, even though it's a beneficial ilm? And is it praiseworthy? And does it have excellence and virtue? That can only be the case if it is like this, like what we see with the Salaf. So once that's clear, the Shaykh goes on, rahimahullah, he then mentions some ayat in the Quran to explain the virtue and the excellence of those who have knowledge and those who do not have knowledge. Right? This knowledge which is ilmun nafi' and which has all of these qualities that we mentioned. From them, he says, أَمَّنْ هُوَ قَانِتٌ آنَاءَ اللَّيْلِ سَاجِدًا وَقَائِمًا يَحْذَرُ الْآخِرَةَ وَيَرْجُو رَحْمَةَ رَبِّهِ. Is the one who stands during the night, prostrating and standing, cautious of the hereafter and hoping in the mercy of his Lord, meaning like one who is not. And so the Shaykh says that, is this person who does this, is he like the one who is like this and the one who does not? The one who is arrogant, the one who does not obey Allah? The answer, of course not. Of course, he cannot be the same. He mentions also another verse, هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Are those equal, those who know and those who do not know? The Shaykh says, just like the living is not like the dead, just like the hearing is not like the deaf, and the seeing is not like the blind, then likewise the one who knows, has ilm, he's not like the one who is ignorant. He mentions also the verse, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah will raise those amongst you who have iman and those who have been given knowledge in ranks. So when you read these verses, keep in mind that ilm that we are speaking of is the ilm that we've described and characterized already. It's not just merely ilm, because then it would be no different to any other type of ilm. Right? It is the ilm that we described in the way through those narrations. That's why he says that the people of knowledge, they are the ones who are praised, and every time they are mentioned, the people praise them. This is because Allah has raised them in this life, and likewise in the hereafter they will be raised in degrees and ranks in accordance to how they established the da'wah to Allah and how they acted upon what they knew. Likewise, the servant who is the true servant, a true worshipper, the Shaykh says, he is the one who calls to Allah upon basira, upon insight, upon this ilm. He mentions the ayah in Surah Yusuf, قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ أَنَا وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِي. Say, this is my path, I call to Allah upon basira, upon insight, upon sure knowledge, I and whoever follows me. So the Shaykh says that this person who knows he is upon a tariq shar'i, upon a legislated path, and he is the one who follows and knows what he's doing, is he the same as the one who simply follows the path because his father followed it and because his grandfather followed it? Meaning he's just following because that's what he knows. And then the Shaykh goes on to mention a very important, beneficial point that we should pay attention to, which is he makes the difference, he outlines the difference between a person who is a worshipper of Allah upon ilm, upon knowledge, and a person who is a worshipper of Allah as a habit and as something that he just does, and he doesn't really pay attention. He doesn't, in his mind, he doesn't think in his mind and bring to mind why is he doing what he's doing. So the ilm doesn't come to his mind while he's doing what he's doing. So Shaykh explains what he means by this. He says, which of these two people is making tahqiq of al-ibadah? Which of the following two is actualizing worship with the meaning of worship? A man who purifies himself, makes tahara, yatatahhar, because he knows that Allah has commanded him to make tahara, and that when he does the tahara, when he does the wudu, that he's doing so upon the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's doing it imtithalan, obedient to Allah, that's why he's doing it, and he's doing in accordance with ittiba, with how the Messenger of Allah, how he did it. Is this man the same as the one when the other one, when he stands and it's like a habit and he knows it's the time, and so all that passes through his mind is I've got to get up and do this, and it's like a habit basically. So the answer the Shaykh says, there is no doubt that the first one, he who is worshipping Allah upon basira, upon basira. Now what does he mean by this? The Shaykh goes on to explain. He means that when you arise and you stand and you make wudu, for example, are you thinking in your mind, why am I doing this? What's led me to do this? The Shaykh says, I stand wa aqif inda hadhihi nuqta, and I ask, are we thinking about the wudu in that we are doing it because Allah said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, idha qumtum ila as-salah, faghsilu wujuhakum wa aydiyakum ila al-marafiq, to the end of the ayah. So meaning, as you are doing wudu, does it come to your mind now? Allah Azza wa Jal said in Surah Al-Ma'idah, the verse of wudu and tayammum, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, idha qumtum ila as-salah, when you stand up to prayer, then wash your faces and your hands up to the right. So is that coming to your mind as you are doing it? So if you ask yourself, the last time I did wudu, or the last how many years I did wudu, did I ever stop and replay this in my mind, that this is why I am doing what I am doing, right? And then he says, does a man when he's doing wudu, does he bring to mind this ayah and that he's doing it imtithalan li amrillah? And likewise, when he does the wudu, does he perceive that he is doing it, that I'm doing this ittiba'an li Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Am I doing it because this is how the Messenger of Allah, how he did it? So in other words, what the Shaykh is saying, that ibadah becomes, we make tahqiq of ibadah, and it is ibadah upon basira, and it is upon ilm, when we consciously think of why are we doing this ibadah, right? That we are making actual imtithal, and that we are making actual imitation. Now most of us will be honest that had we not heard the Shaykh say this, then we would struggle to find when was the last time I played this in my mind when I did wudu, to actually consciously bring to mind that I am making imtithal and I'm making ittiba. We don't, because it becomes like a habit, right? So this is the difference between an act of ibadah, which is done upon basira, in which we are making tahqiq of all of the elements of ibadah, being obedient to Allah, making imtithal of His command, making ittiba of the Messenger. So these are things which if you bring to mind, obviously this also determines the extent of reward. So are you being rewarded 10 times? Are you being rewarded 700 times? Or multiple times, even more than that? Right? So this is very important. The Shaykh said that I want to stop on this point and reflect upon this point because it is very, very important. And so he says, yes, amongst us are those who maybe bring this to mind, maybe others, there are people who don't bring this to mind. So the Shaykh then goes on to say that let's go back now and to start discussing some of the fada'il, the virtues and the excellences of knowledge, because this knowledge, as we said, a person becomes upon basira and his heart is attached to worship, and he does it, so it is not an aada, it is actual ibadah. So the Shaykh goes on to mention maybe 12 or 13 fada'il of ilm. I'll take maybe a handful of those. So the first one he says, وَمِنْ أَهَمِّ فَضَائِلِ الْعِلْمِ مَا يَلِي. First of all he says, إِنَّهُ إِرْثُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. This we all know, that this ilm, beneficial ilm, it is the inheritance left by the prophets. He mentions the hadith, لَمْ يُوَرِثُوا دِينَارًا وَلَا دِرْهَمًا وَإِنَّمَا وَرَّثُوا الْعِلْمِ. So the prophets, they did not leave neither dirham nor dinar as inheritance, but they left knowledge. So whoever takes it from this knowledge then has taken a tremendous portion. The Shaykh says that we are now in the 15th century Hijri. And if you are from the people of knowledge, if you are someone who acquires this knowledge, then you can say that you have inherited from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? There are people who say, I inherited 100,000 from my parents. I inherited a house from my parents. People inherit millions. But if you are someone who has memorized, say for example, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, a hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab, that is what you have inherited from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is far superior to any type of wealth, to any type of inheritance that you might take from your parents or from anybody else. So the Shaykh is saying that this in itself shows the virtue and the excellence of ilm, in that it is an inheritance from the Messenger of Allah who conveyed the ilm of Allah to us, and we are its inheritors. Right? This is sufficient to indicate its virtue. The second, he says, أَنَّهُ يَبْقَى وَالْمَالُ يَفْنَى. That in relation to knowledge, knowledge persists and remains, but wealth, it perishes. And then he gives an example. In fact, the Shaykh also mentions this in Iyād Salihin, in his sharh of Iyād Salihin, in Kitabul Ilm. If you go to Kitabul Ilm of Iyād Salihin, and the Shaykh rahimahullah, he mentions this same point, and he basically makes the point. He says that if you were to look at all of the kings, princes, leaders in the whole of Islamic history, and you look at what they did, they had wealth, they established they established bridges, buildings, projects to benefit the Muslims, awqaf, for the benefit of the Muslims, and they did so much. But can you remember any of their names? Can you remember a prominent ruler or prince for those deeds? No. But when you read a hadith, whose name comes? Huh? Abu Hurairah, Abdullah bin Umar, Ibn Abbas. Every time you are reading knowledge, whose name is mentioned? It is these companions. And the Shaykh says, look at Abu Hurairah for example, that he was from the fuqara, from the poor and the needy of the Sahaba. He would even become unconscious from hunger. He was so hungry and so weak. And the Shaykh says, وَأَسْأَلُكُمْ بِاللَّهِ هَلْ يَجْرِي لِأَبِي هُرَيْرَ ذِكْرٌ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِي أَصْرِنَا أَمْ لَا? I ask you, does the mention of Abu Hurairah, does it continue in our time or not? Of course it does. Anytime you read any book of hadith, you're going to see Abu Hurairah, Abdullah bin Umar, Ibn Abbas, right? You're going to hear these names. So knowledge remains, but wealth perishes. So the kings, the rulers, the princes, the wealthy people, they had wealth. They did whatever they did with that wealth. They could even have given in charity projects to help the Muslims, but has their mention remained? No. Whose mention has remained? The one who have conveyed the inheritance, the knowledge, the beneficial knowledge of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he mentions, فَعَلَيْكِ يَا طَالِبُ الْعِلْمِ أَن تَسْتَمْسِكْ بِالْعِلْمِ فَقَدْ ثَبَتَ فِي الْحَدِيثِ أَنَّ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, he said, upon you, O student of knowledge, is to hold fast to knowledge, to seeking knowledge, because it is established in the hadith that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, إِذَا مَاتَ الْإِنسَانِ إِنْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. When a man dies, all of his action is cut off except for three. صدقة جارية أو علم ينتفع به أو ولد صالح يدعو له. It is either recurring charity, or it is knowledge which continues to be benefited from, or it is a righteous son who supplicates for him. So this is a second virtue and excellence of ilm, that it remains and persists, unlike other affairs which perish and which may be forgotten. The third benefit the Shaykh mentions, rahimahullah, is that a person does not need to exhaust himself or tire himself in protecting this knowledge. Why? Because if Allah Azza wa Jal bestows you with ilm, its place is in the heart. Nobody can come and steal it from you. You don't need to put the knowledge when you go to sleep at night, let me put it in the box with the key and a lock. No, the knowledge is in your heart. And it will remain in your heart, of course, unless you are neglectful or you commit sins. Right? So you are the one who will remove the ilm from your heart. Nobody can steal it from you. So, unlike wealth, wealth has to be guarded. Wealth has to be preserved in this manner. As for ilm, then it is knowledge that actually protects you, not the other way around. You have to protect wealth, but you don't have to protect knowledge. Nobody's going to steal it from you. Rather, the knowledge is what actually protects you. The fourth thing that the Shaykh mentions, rahimahullah, is that a person, أن الإنسان يتوصل به إلى أن يكون من الشهداء على الحق. That through this ilm, a person becomes somebody who becomes a witness over the truth. A witness over the truth. What is the evidence? It's the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal in Surah Ali Imran, شهد الله أنه لا إله إلا هو والملائكة وأولو العلم قائما بالقسط. So here, he mentions that Allah Azza wa Jal said ulul ilm. He did not say ulul mal. He said people of knowledge, not the people of wealth. And sufficient for you it is, فَيَكْفِيكَ فَخْرًا يَا طَالِبَ الْعِلْمِ أَن تَكُونَ مِمَّنْ شَهِدَ اللَّهُ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ مَعَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ الَّذِينَ يَشْهَدُونَ بِوَحْدَانِيَةِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. So sufficient boast and pride is it for you, O seeker of knowledge, that you will be from those whom Allah has testified, with respect to, that there is none worthy of worship except He, along with the angels. He put you along with the angels. And sufficient is that as a praise for this, for the people of knowledge. In fact, this ayah, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, in his book, Miftah Dar al-Sa'ada, in the first volume, he shows how this ayah explains the excellence of knowledge from 152 different angles. Right? So he spends most of the first volume explaining how this one verse, how Allah puts the testimony, His own testimony, with the testimony of the angels and with the testimony of the people of knowledge, how that is an evidence for the excellence of ilm, of knowledge, the fadl of ilm, from more than 152 different angles. Obviously, I'll mention a few here. We don't need to go through all of them, but he says, for example, that from them is, first of all, Allah chose the people of knowledge specifically, as opposed to any others from amongst mankind. Secondly, He connected His shahada with their shahada, with that of the angels and theirs. Thirdly, He connected it with the shahada of the angels. And He goes on to mention many others. I'll mention one more, just Allah Azza wa Jal in this ayah, He singled out the verb. So he mentioned shahida only once. So he said shahidallahu annahu la ilaha illahu wal malaika. He didn't say wa shahida al malaika, and he didn't say wa shahida ulul ilm. Right? So he made one verb for all three. For Allah, for the angels, for the people of knowledge. Which indicates, which shows like the how Allah made His testimony. So Allah is testifying in relation to Himself through the people of knowledge for Himself. So in other words, it's the people of knowledge become His witnesses, and He is using them as His witness, and He is a witness Himself. So all of this is inseparable, and this indicates even more so the greatness of ilm. If this wasn't sufficient, this would be enough to indicate the greatness of this ilm. And as I said, he goes and mentions 152 different angles from how this ayah indicates the virtue and the excellence of knowledge. Also from the excellence and virtue of knowledge is the fact that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he did not encourage anyone to envy other people for anything except for two bounties and two favors. The first of them is talabul ilm wal amal bihi, to seek knowledge and to act upon the knowledge. And the second is the one who trades and he uses his wealth to serve Islam. Right? So we know that envy and jealousy is a poison of the heart. It is prohibited. However, there are two exceptions, and this is in the hadith of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, La hasad illa fi ithnatayn. There is no envy except in relation to two. Aman rajulun atahu Allahu malan fasallatahu ala halakatihi fil haqq. A man to whom Allah has given wealth, so he uses it and he spends it and destroys it in aid of the truth. وَرَجُلٌ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ حِكْمَةً فَهُوَ يَقْضِي بِهَا وَيُعَلِّمُهَا. And a man to whom Allah has given wisdom, and wisdom comes from knowledge obviously, and he then judges with it and he teaches it. So this is a very, very important point, that first of all it shows the virtue and excellence of knowledge, in that it is the only thing that a person can have envy with respect to. However, just to focus on this point a bit more, it's important to understand that what the Shaykh said, or what the hadith says, it is not that you envy someone because he has knowledge. You envy someone because the reward he is getting for acting upon the knowledge. Do you understand? That's what the envy is for. It's not like, mashallah, this guy has memorized this and this and this, and this brother knows this, this and this. Like, you're not envious just merely of the knowledge, because that, like we said before, this is not beneficial knowledge. But you see very clearly in the hadith and what the Shaykh said, that it is a man to whom Allah has given wisdom, and he judges by it and he teaches other people, right? So you are after the reward, you are envious of the reward, not just the mere knowledge in itself. And likewise, the man who Allah has given wealth, tremendous wealth, and he spends it to spread Islam, to help poor people, to build mosques, or to build bridges, or to plant trees, or whatever it might be, you are envious of the reward, and you want that reward. And you wish that if you had that, then you would do the same thing, and you hope Allah. So it's not about the wealth in itself, nor is it about the knowledge in itself. It is the reward from the actual action. So you desire the action. It would be foolish for you to think, if only I had that wealth, and you are jealous of the wealth. If only you had that ilm and you are jealous of the ilm. This is not what is intended. Now, since the Shaykh mentioned this, it's very important, this issue of jealousy, because as we said before, we mentioned earlier that al-ilmun nafi', beneficial knowledge, if you possess it, doesn't mean it's going to be beneficial in relation to you, because there are certain things that have to be present. There has to be khashya, there has to be taqwa, there has to be rectification of the inside, and there has to be absence of being polluted with sin and being polluted with motivations for the world, for wealth, for money, and for status. And one of those poisons is in fact jealousy. It is one of the great poisons that the Shaykh Rahimullah actually then goes, he dedicates a specific section on the dangers that a student of knowledge has to avoid, and one of them is this issue of al-hasad. And so we'll speak about this inshallah because of its importance. The Shaykh mentions, first of all, what is the definition of al-hasad? It is karahat ma an'ama Allahu bihi ala ghayrih. Right? The scholars differ as to what is the definition of al-hasad, of jealousy. Some scholars say that it is to dislike that Allah has given somebody else a favor and a bounty. And then some other scholars say, but it also has to be that you want that bounty to end. You want that bounty to end in that person. But some scholars say no. This second part is not actually required for jealousy. Jealousy, and this is the view of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah as well, فَالْحَسَدْ كَرَاهَةُ الْإِنسَانِ مَا أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ بِهِ عَلَى غَيْرِهِ. Right? Jealousy is that you dislike what Allah has given as a favor to somebody else. It's not necessarily part of jealousy that you also now have to, desire and want that bounty is, ended and removed. So the Shaykh says, وَالْحَسَدْ لَا تَخْلُ مِنْهُ النُّفُوسِ. The souls cannot be free of jealousy. And it, finds its way into the hearts by necessity. The Shaykh then brings a hadith which is actually da'if, it's not an authentic hadith. The scholars have explained it's not a hadith, but the meaning would be correct. That if you are jealous, إِذَا حَسَدْتَ فَلَا تَبْغِ وَإِذَا ظَنَنْتَ فَلَا تُحَقِّقْ. Right? The meaning is that if you have envy, then do not act upon that envy. Do not act upon it. Do not now say something. Do not now do something as an expression of that envy. Right? But the hadith is not authentic. In any case, the Shaykh says that if you were to have this envy and act upon it or speak in a way to harm that person, you have now shared a trait of the Yahud. Because this is from the traits of the Yahud. أَمْ يَحْسُدُونَ النَّاسِ عَلَى مَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Do they envy the people because of what Allah has given to them from His bounty? So the Shaykh goes on to explain that in relation to envy, there are so many mahadhir. There are cautions that exist in relation to envy. He says, first of all, a person who's envious and jealous, what's the reality of what he's disliking? He's disliking what Allah has decreed. Right? So if you are envious and you dislike that Allah has given somebody a bounty, a ni'mah, it could be fiqh in the religion, it could be wealth, it could be whatever, but obviously in this case it is ilm. He says that this person is actually disliking lima qaddarahu kawnan, what Allah has decreed to be kawnan in terms of his creation. That's first of all, that's the first thing that you fall into, if this impulse enters into your heart. The second thing he says, أن الحسد يأكل الحسنات كما تأكل النار الحطب. That envy eats away your good deeds in the same way that a fire consumes the wood. And overwhelmingly, you see that the envious person, when he envies that person, he will say things and will try to make the people flee from him, and he will make hints and insinuations and try to belittle him and so on and so forth. So he falls into major sins. And then those major sins, they consume his good deeds like the fire consumes the wood. The third, he says, that the envious person is one who is actually punished, meaning in the life of this world, with a type of jahim, with a type of nar, with a type of fire, which eats him and consumes him, meaning in the life of this world. And that's because every time he sees the ni'mah upon someone else from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he becomes, filled with grief. his chest becomes narrow and it disturbs him and harms him. And he's filled with, so this person really is just like burning himself and consuming himself. It's as if he is throwing himself into his own Jahannam and his own nar by way of this jealousy. And this is from the dangers of jealousy. Fourthly, that within hasad, anna fil hasad tashbihan bil yahud. That in this hasad, it is a resemblance to the Yahud, because the Yahud, they are jealous. They are jealous. Ahlul Kitab in general are jealous. They are jealous that Allah Azza wa Jal put the prophethood among the Arabs. He revealed the Quran to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are envious that Allah gave victory to Islam and made it uppermost and dominant. They are envious of what is in the hands of the people, of wealth and possessions, because they believe it belongs to them. Right? So they have envy and they have this jealousy. So if you hold this trait in a way other than the two exceptions that we mentioned earlier on, then you have a khasla, you have a, from the khisal of the Yahud, you have a trait among the traits of the Yahud. And as the Messenger of Allah, he said, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." So this hadith now would apply to you, that whoever resembles a people, then he is from among them. Also he said that no matter how, number 5, no matter how much you might envy, no matter how much, how strong this envy might be, it is not possible for anyone to remove the ni'mah of Allah from that person. Your envy and jealousy will not do anything. You can be as envious and jealous as you want. Allah's ni'mah won't be raised. So if this is not possible, then what reason, what purpose is there to harbor any envy or jealousy in the heart? It doesn't make any sense. The 6th, he said that al-hasad yunafi kamal al-iman. That to have this envy, it's something that actually clashes with and invalidates the perfection of iman. Because the Messenger of Allah, he said, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yuhibbu li akhihi ma yuhibbu li nafsih." None of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. So just like you you wouldn't want the favor of Allah to be removed from you, then likewise you shouldn't want the favor of Allah to be removed from anybody else. So you can't harbor this type of feeling. Likewise, 7th, that al-hasad yujibu i'rad al-abd an su'alillahi ta'ala min fadlihi. That al-hasad is something that prevents you from asking Allah from His bounty. Why? Because you are so grieved and harmed and vexed by this bounty that Allah has given to somebody else, that you don't ask Allah directly yourself for this bounty. As Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says in the Quran, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْدَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْدٍ لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. So look at what Allah commanded in this ayah. He said, do not crave for that which Allah has given to others and made them excel over others. For the men is a portion of what they earn, and for the women is a portion of what they earn, but ask Allah from His fadl. So don't crave what other people have. You ask Allah directly for what, because He is the giver, He is the one who gives. The Shaykh then continues, rahimahullah, mentions an 8th caution, أن الحسد يوجب ازدراء نعمة الله عليه. That this envy or this jealousy, it necessitates that you are then belittling the actual favor of Allah upon you, as if you have no ni'mah, you have nothing to be pleased about that Allah has given to you, such that you should be angry. So this is also another caution, that when you look at what Allah has given to others, you start belittling the actual bounties and the favors that Allah has given to you. And so the Shaykh goes on to mention a few others, but I think we'll round it off there to stop for the prayer and then to leave space for the next talk, inshallah, at 9:30. Just to round up then, inshallah, we've taken some benefits from the book, Kitabul Ilm, and there's two main issues then, really, to summarize two main points. First of all, what is ilm? What is the definition of ilm? And how it is distinguished from what is the naqid of ilm, jahl murakkab, and what doesn't reach the level of ilm, shak and wahm. Right? This is something that we need to know, because in our lives, whether it's the worldly knowledge or whether it's the religious knowledge, we have to proceed upon ilm, on actual ilm, or in some circumstances upon ghalabatul dhann, right? So we can't act upon shak or jahl or wahm. So this applies in all situations, in religious knowledge, in your family life, in your trade, in your business, it applies all across the board. This categorization of the maratibul ilm applies in all respects. So first we must know what is actual ilm. What is actual ilm? Then we said what is the beneficial knowledge, al-ilm al-nafi'. And so we explained that from Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah and others. And then in today's lesson we are really speaking about when does that ilm become beneficial for you? And when does it become the praiseworthy knowledge? It's not the case that just because you hold ilm, this now is some virtue and excellence for you, and you are now praised in the way that Allah praises the people of knowledge. No. Because the ilm, as we said, it has to be upon what we mentioned, upon khashya, upon taqwa, and the absence of sin, the absence of impure intentions, and so on and so forth. These are things which are toxic and which now no longer make it to be beneficial knowledge in your case. Right? And the last of them is jealousy that we mentioned. Obviously there's a lot more, but inshallah we ask Allah to reward the Shaykh for benefiting us from his knowledge. And maybe there is something in all of this that we can take and act upon and benefit from. And with that we'll conclude. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ajma'in.